Oh yeah. What's up, everybody? How's everybody doing, man? Welcome to the Artist of Data Science Happy Hour. It is Friday, February 12th, 2021, man. We got the room packed. We got a lot of people coming in, man. I hope you guys are having a great week. Good to see all you guys here. A lot of old friends. Looks like some new names. I love seeing this, man. How you guys doing today?
What's going on, yo?
Not much, man. Just hanging out. Just hanging out, man. Super excited you guys are here. Tom, how's it going? We got Coach, we got Waco, we got we got Christian. Good to see you again, man. It's been a while. Man, so many
Hey guys, yeah.
oh man, it's good to see you. All right, guys. So man, I wish Kate was here. I wish we can give her all just a round of applause for putting on an amazing event. I had no part in planning that event at all, but I can imagine how stressful and intense that was for her to organize that many people live. So big ups to Kate. Thank you for putting on such an amazing event. I really, really appreciate that. I know the community appreciates it as well. Bravo, man, stellar. I foresee in the very near future a lot of knockoff events
It
coming.
was very, very insightful
Oh, Coach froze on
session.
us. You froze on us. Oh, it's all good.
It was very, very insightful session. The GitHub, particularly the GitHub part, was really helpful. So thanks.
Oh,
Awesome.
thank you. Yeah, yeah. My presentation is available on her website, or not her website, but on her YouTube channel. So definitely go check it out if you did not get an opportunity to check it out. Um, Mine, along with all the other presenters who did just an amazing job, all of that is there for you to check out. So definitely go for it. So guys, welcome. Excited to have you guys here. So I guess let's open up with some questions, man. Anybody have any questions? Please go for it.
I do have one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it got me thinking today. I actually thought about this last week after the happy hours, and then Wiko, he asked about people how they take notes and like what approaches they use, where they put them. And my broader question is around like how do people when you're learning something new, like how do you keep track of it, and like how do you do that? Like are you building a second brain as some people do? Are you just taking notes and organizing them? Like, what are some strategies that people here have for kind of absorbing all this new knowledge as we're constantly learning?
Oh man, that's an excellent question. I'd love to hear what everybody else does, but yeah, I take notes. Like I mostly do my notes by hand. I think there's something about physically writing stuff down that helps me personally absorb it a lot better. It strengthens that connection in a weird way. So that's what I do. But even before that, like let's say I open up like a new book by O'Reilly. That's a data science book. Um, as soon as I open up that chapter, first thing I do is I'll skim through the chapter at a high level. Like I'll just look through, what are all the figures that we have in here? Oh, great. What are the captions for the figures? What are some of the bolded keywords that are popping out? And then immediately I'll start writing those down, right? And when I write that down, I'm not like defining it or anything, just write it down so I consciously am aware of it, right? Um, and like there's a couple of brain processes that happen when you do this, right? When you're flipping through a book and looking at stuff before you dive deep, you're priming the pump, so to speak, right? Making yourself aware of the concepts that you need to look out for. So then, like that network in your brain called the reticular activating system kind of starts firing up and starts looking for, I guess, that information. So that's kind of my approach to it, and just notes, man. I've got like I've got notes and notes and notebooks. Like I got to send you guys a picture of my desk one of these days. What I got going on here. It's pretty intense. But I'd love to hear. I'd love to hear from the community, man. What do you guys do? Especially, I'd love to hear from Tom, and I'd love to hear from Jacqueline, because I know Jacqueline's doing some hardcore studying.
I can tell you, I literally was in grad school realizing how much I loved learning. And by the way, me talking about grad school is a historic event. But God brought mind maps my way. and I love mind maps. I can't encourage them enough. When my team and I write a blog post together, we start with a mind map, we break it down to an outline. And but even though I hate paper and I hate writing notes, I have to agree with Harpreet. The digital mind map tools are great, but they're never as good as doing a mind map on paper. I've just got to confess that. But that's my one little piece. I'm actually very excited to hear from others on this one.
Yes, mind maps are freaking amazing. Yes, excellent point. So everybody that just came in, the topic is, we've got so much to study, so much to learn. How do people keep track of what it is that they're studying, what it is that they're learning? Tom talked about mind maps. I think that's great. So here's like a glimpse of some of my notes, right, that I write. So I've got two columns, right? One column is note taking, one column is note making, right? So that's one thing that I do as well. So I'll take notes and then I'll regurgitate it, reinterpret it, and then mind maps as well. I don't think I have any mind maps in this notebook, but that's a big thing. Jacqueline,
I
what
had
do you do?
I
Oh
have
yeah,
a couple
yeah,
questions to bounce off of both of y'all, Harp
yeah.
and Tom. You were talking about before you entirely read a book, you kind of skim through everything and kind of take notes on that. How far do you go in the book? Do you maybe skim a chapter and then read the chapter, or do you like go through the entire book? Because I feel like personally, I would lose a lot of that in the process.
Yeah, chapter at a time for me. I'll go through just
Gotcha.
one chapter and I'll read the summary first, and then go back and read the other stuff.
And then consume the chapter.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And Tom, before I forget, y'all were talking about mind maps and all that, and you draw them out by hand. What does that really look like in my head? When I think of mind maps, I think of circles, some ideas, lines connecting circles, more ideas, branching off like that. Is that about right?
Not exactly. Am I muted? Am I
No,
on? No,
I hear
okay, sorry. It's very nonlinear. It's
Gotcha.
just central point, bigger points, and then mine gets quite messy. Thank you for doing that. Trying to hold it still. Oh, it's in mirror image. Sorry. Anyway.
No, that's cool though. That helps a lot.
But Tony Buzan published a book. It's old now. It may even be out of print, so maybe you can find it for free. But it's very well done. And to your other question, though, when JUCO is, do I do it chapter at a time or whole book? Yes, I do both.
Gotcha.
But I actually do. I'll spend a few times just breezing the table of contents, then looking through the whole book. And JUCO, I can't even explain it to you, but it warms your mind up to the material. And it's like you've read 3 references instead of 1. I had to do it with Dennis's book on Transformers, and it totally helped a lot. But then sometimes you just find you're in the groove after a while, and you just read a chapter straight because you've already gotten acquainted with the material. Yay!
Is this the book?
That's the book.
That's the book. Yeah. So that's another great resource I'd recommend. Barbara Oakley has this course on Coursera, absolutely free, called Learning How to Learn. It is hands down, like in terms of metrics, the most popular online course ever taken. I did an interview with her that won't be released for quite some time. It's in the pipeline, but definitely look up her work. She is phenomenal. Jim Quick has a lot of great resources as well. But yeah, let's hear. So for everybody just came in, the topic is how the hell do we keep up with learning? What's our learning habits? What are our learning techniques? So let's hear from Jacqueline. Then after Jacqueline, let's hear from Eric, because I think both of you guys are still in school, right? So I think it'd be great to hear what you students are doing to keep up.
So I just finished a master's in mathematics, and what I found helped me the most is when I'm going through a textbook, I am always taking notes on the side, whether it's like physically or even just if it's on my computer, I have notes open beside, and I'm always doing a summary of what I'm doing. And I find that before moving on to like a next topic, I can always revisit my notes. And yeah, I find it helps a lot, this summarization.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Eric, what about you?
Doing stuff badly is a good way to learn. So I guess kind of a couple of things is like when I started learning Python, I was like, oh, I want to understand something about. I found this data set of like hacked passwords, and so I wanted to like learn some stuff about hacked passwords, but I had to figure out like how do I get the first character off of a password or whatever, and so it was just learning how am I actually going to do that. And somewhere I still have the gist on GitHub. It's terrible. I would never share it, but I mean, I would never share it for a resume thing, but it was a really good learning experience. And so I really enjoyed it. Good way to get started. And the other thing is just like, I read, like reading stuff, like doing, I call wiki walks where, you know, if you're on Wikipedia and you like deep click links for a while, and by the time you get a few links into it, you know, a few links deep, you don't understand anything that's on the page anymore. It's like, all right, I've gone far enough. I guess I can go back. And then, you know, so just kind of like exhausting that knowledge. And so I think that, and that also though, it builds lots of like the Chip and Dan Heath, they talk about ideas and things being like Velcro, right? And I see it as, you know, when I'm learning about whatever topic it is, if I go and I look at several kind of surrounding topics, it's like I'm kind of putting the little, you know, the prickly side of the Velcro out so that as I'm going about the rest of my life, something else is going to come along and it's going to catch, and I'm going to be able to understand and relate to that thing or that person, that concept, whatever, a little better. It's also like good Jeopardy prep because you're just kind of like always connected to different ideas.
Yeah, the Heath brothers wrote the book Made to Stick. Tried to get them
I
on the
love that
show.
book.
Yeah, tried to get them on the podcast, but didn't work out this time around. But yeah, let's hear from a couple more people. Let's hear from Monica and let's hear from Ben. And then, guys, while we're hearing responses from Monica and Ben, if you have a question, feel free to type out "I have a question" into the chat, and then that way I can hold your place in line. But I do have a couple of questions from a community member through email that we can get into as well. So Monica and then Ben.
All right, learning. This is my favorite topic. So anytime I'm learning anything, I like to share what I'm learning with others. If you teach others, you kind of solidify in your own head like what you're learning. Kind of like explain like I'm 5. If you're able to explain a concept that's very detailed to somebody that really doesn't know the topic, then you know that you understand it yourself really well. So I think just sharing with others and kind of getting discussions going with others, and then it kind of loops into like learning from other people, and then it's awesome.
Yeah, I like this. I forgot. I don't know who this quote is from, but when you teach something, you get to learn it twice. I think that might be like an ancient wisdom quote, but yeah, that's a good one. Ben, what about you?
He said he had a candidate call in the chat and he had to drop.
All right, so I guess. Okay, yeah, I guess he's gone. So, anybody else want to chime in on this one? If not, then we can take some questions.
Before?
Yeah, absolutely, go for it.
Just quickly, my keyword is the cheat sheet. That doesn't just go to books or anything, but it goes for everything of my projects, my ideas. Basically, I always have like a heading, which is very, very short, just to kind of trigger your memory. Then I have a short summary that I make after, just very, very brief. And technically, after that, I will add links to sites or references or anything like that. And then I have a folder structure on my computer where I save it, where it's linked to whether it's work related, if it's a book you read, whatever it is, just to categorize. Technically, another place to keep the cheat sheet for a particular book, you put it inside the book. That way, when you go back into the book, instead of going through the whole thing, you have reference to pages or, yeah, whatever topics or how you structure that. And to me, the key is to build your own structure so that it's your own keywords, it's something that you're going to be using for a long time. It's not just today. And you will see that over time, you're actually going to start building it very like you're doing your programming or whatever you do. you actually start to build a structure in it. And guess what? You can always automate that structure. We have the tools, I guess, to do that. I use my Excel. I work in auditing, so I do a lot of formulas, analyzing things in Excel. So I got like a whole folder structure just on all the formulas that I've used. When I suddenly find a solution, and believe me, you always find. I just recently realized that OR function and how to really utilize it. So now I have an actual physical work that I've done and with the formula and the results. So in the future, I can go back because I know that 3 months from now, I won't remember, but I remember I used it. So the cheat sheet approach to me, that's the key. I'm lazy. But like I always say, if you're not lazy, they wouldn't have invented the wheel if it wasn't for laziness.
This is true. This is true. Thank you, Tor. Great tips. So Austin, you got a bunch of resources and
Yeah.
help there, man. Um, so yeah, let's. So I've got in terms of questions in line, I've got Tor, then I got Tom, then I got Anas, and then couple of questions for that I got through email that we can do as well. Shout out to Dave. I just saw Dave come in. Sorry guys, I'm like bouncing around with screens here. Greg is in the house too. Good to see you, Greg. Jennifer, how you doing? Dylan, all right, man. I love it. Tort, do you want to take over and have your
Sure, I can
question?
continue. My I'm thinking about a concept right now, and given that concept, it means that you will be potentially using. I mean, like I said, I'm lazy. I don't want to invent all the formulas and the programming or learning or whatever it is. So the question I have is more related to copyrights and how you utilize other people's work and what kind of, I mean, free is always the best. However, there are payments, there are accreditations, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm just wondering how you're dealing with that technically and also from a more soft approach.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Um, I think there's a few different licensing types that I've seen on like GitHub, um, and I don't know if that's what you're talking if that's what you're talking about, but
I picked one up on GitHub today. So those are things that the Benford analysis, for example. I mean, you're not really inventing anything new,
yeah,
and
yeah,
but people may have programmed it differently.
yeah.
I didn't see any reference to cost. I could just download it. That was for our program. So I'm just starting to kind of pick up on these things.
Yeah, so yeah, that's great. I'd love to hear from everybody else on this. But like in my perspective, like if I see it put up on GitHub and there's like code chunks that I can be inspired by, and I'll freely use them. But typically stuff that's on GitHub, there's always a license file. In that license file, there's like one of three licenses. There's like the MIT license, and I can't remember the other two. And typically stuff on GitHub is open source, and I believe it is freely available for you to use. But um, I mean, I'd love to hear. Let's hear from Dave on this one.
Okay, so first up, I'm not a lawyer, so don't sue me if I tell you something and you get sued yourself. So generally speaking, open source licenses doesn't necessarily mean that you can do whatever you want with the code in particular. So you really have to pay attention to what license the software is provided under. Some of the most permissive are the MIT license. I believe the Apache 2 license is also quite permissive as well. Unfortunately, a lot of R is released under some of the GPL licenses, and they can be quite restrictive depending on what you want to do, especially in a commercial software situation. So the best course of action is, generally speaking, if the license isn't embedded in the code, like for example in the comments, which is a good practice by the way, or if it's not specifically listed in the GitHub, assume it's one of the more restrictive GPL licenses at a minimum. It's a good idea, especially if, like I said, especially if you're using it for commercial purposes. So if you're trying to build a product that you're going to sell, you can be bit big time. For example, some of the early GPL licenses basically say, if you embed our code in your commercial product, you now have to open source all of your code, because essentially we're like a virus. We plug into your code base and we take it over. So be very, very careful with borrowing people's code. Generally speaking, the best plan of attack, Tor, and you're not going to like hearing this, is write it yourself, and then you're golden.
Yeah, but then I have to learn.
And you,
Oh,
David, have
thanks.
some good tips there. See, I think Eric just posted something in here about the various license types. Like I steal like an artist. What can I say? This is what I do. Anybody else have experience with this? Oh, by the way, I see Nicholas in the building. What's up, Nicholas? Thanks for hanging out. Anybody else have any tips on stealing like an artist when it comes to code on GitHub? I do that shit all the time. All right, doesn't look like it. All right, Tom, it is your turn, my friend.
Yeah, and I will just follow up by reminding everyone that David and Andy, Pragmatic Programmer authors, 20 plus year top selling book, they're really big proponents of using your IDE for everything. So just speaking for them, take more notes in your IDE and get better at Git by keeping your notes in GitHub or GitLab or whatever. But my very important question to all of us, and just help me, yes, good job, is, hey, can y'all help me remember to ask Ben what that picture of him was on his latest post? I guessed Ben in the woods, but he hasn't given an answer yet. So when he comes back on, Harpreet, if you could just remember to ask him that for us.
Yeah, I'll definitely ask Ben about his picture where he's posing as the homeless hippie prophet. Those are his words during an office hour, not mine. All right. But wait, that was your question, Tom? Okay, cool. So let's go to Anas. Anas, are you still here?
Yeah, still here. Thank you. So recently I've been looking for more books that talks about you can say like the way of thinking when you approach a business in data science, because a lot of books out there about like code. Okay, so you learn the regression analysis, clustering, but I need a book that kind of guide me. How can I approach that how can I implement that in a business so I can make money out of the data that I have? So yeah, insights.
Yeah,
the
so
way of thinking.
my absolute favorite book is Data Science for Business by Foster Provost and Timothy Fawcett, or Tom Fawcett. Unfortunately, Fawcett just passed away earlier this year. He was hit by a car. It was tragic. But Data Science for Business is an excellent book. I absolutely love that book. Highly recommend it. And another book that is by Doug Rose. Well, actually, Doug Rose has a number of courses on LinkedIn Learning that are just phenomenal. And it's all about kind of like the business aspect of data science. So I recommend those two highly. Data Science for Business, it might be a little bit old, but like it's more focused on principles than tools and things like that. So it's kind of evergreen in that sense. There's also Dave's class, I think, that is supposed to be pretty amazing, right, Dave? Do you got any tips for how to learn about applying data science in business contexts?
So first of all of my classes are amazing. No, I'm kidding. So my partner and I have a class that we teach, which is called Business Analysis for Everyone. And it's actually based on the book that I just put in the chat, which is Making Sense of Data by Dr. Donald J. Wheeler. People want to get super fascinated, quite frankly, with like, oh, I need to build a recommendation engine. I need to build this and I need to build that to really drive business value. Actually, most business value in most companies is not from that. It's literally just doing analytics rigorously day in and day out across all the roles in the company. So I always recommend you start there first before you worry about, hey, can I build a recommendation engine and drive 25% increase in revenue? I mean, which of course you can do potentially, but that's a very big long-term project. You can actually get a lot of disproportionate value in the business from applying relatively simple analytical techniques across various scenarios. For example, marketing, that's a big one.
Absolutely great advice. I never even knew about that book. I'm gonna have to download that. How about anybody else? Tom or Greg or Monica or Jennifer? Any tips on data science for business?
Antonio here. Can you hear me, Harpreet?
Oh yeah, I guess I can hear you. Sorry, man. It's the people who have their cameras turned off, they don't show up on my screen, so I apologize for that. Yeah, Antonio, go for it.
Oh no. Yeah, I couldn't make it home. I got stuck in traffic, so I'm listening from the car. But I think the one book that made the most difference for me in terms of was How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And it's because I was reading this recently, and it's so true. Well, 85% of AI and machine learning projects fail due to communication issues rather than technology. And I've noticed that at my work, there was we built this beautiful data product. It was about customer acquisition, and the teams weren't using it. So I started this, and I started asking question, what is happening? Everybody was trying to split. And then I used skills from that, and I talked to the guy. He's like, well, I'm not using it because I don't like the guy who built it. And I was like, are you kidding me? That was the whole issue all along, you know? And just really drill down into that book, learn how to talk to people. Unfortunately, and I hate this part of it, but I noticed that if you don't, it's a lot of politics in companies, and if people don't like you, doesn't matter how good your data product is, they're not gonna use it. So that's been my experience. So I always recommend that one, How to Win Friends and Influence People, one of my favorites. And also the one you mentioned before, Made to Stick. I think it's also great. A lot of times we can think that our project is great, we build stuff, but if it's not simple, if the business doesn't understand it, they won't use it. So those are the two books I recommend.
Oh man, I absolutely love that. How to Win Friends and Influence People is amazing, an amazing book, and I think you can actually get it for free online because it's like that classic. So definitely look for that.
Yeah, it's so old. You just type it in; it's free.
Yeah. Nicholas, I'd love to hear from you on this one.
Very quick point from me. I think most of us will probably admit that we live in the world of data. Like that's our little bubble that we live in, and we interact with data. We speak the language of data, and it's easy to forget that most other people, the vast majority of people in the world, don't care about data in the way that we do. And I think it's worth remembering that when we interact with other people, to speak their language, to speak in terms of things that they're interested in, and to sort of suppress our instincts to talk about models and to talk tech jargon and languages. And actually, these are people that don't really live in our world. They don't know a lot about it, and they just want to know what the bottom line is, what that means in terms or in terminology that they care about. And I just think that's a really important point to remember.
I just wanted to add, Harpreet, really quick.
Okay, go for it.
Nicholas and I seem like two peas in a pod on this topic, and you don't really need to read a book, in my opinion. You need to practice a 4-letter word: care. Get off your butt, go talk to your business counterparts, find out where they're bleeding, where they're hurting, find that intersection between what they need and what you can do as a data scientist. But it happens by converting people from not hating you to knowing that you care. And the reason I can speak so expertly on this is because I've screwed up at it worse than anyone I've ever met, including Dave Langer.
So Anas, there you go, man. You got a lot of great advice there. So again, just repeating for people in terms of books, you've got Data Science for Business by Foster Provost and the late Tom Fawcett. You've got Making Sense of Data by Donald J. Wheeler. You've got Pete Rose's book. I think it's just called Data Science or Data Science for Business. I'd also like to throw out there Doug Rose, not Pete Rose. Pete Rose is a baseball player. Doug Rose. Doug Rose has classes on LinkedIn, which are amazing. And then you've also got kind of like the people management side of it as well, which everybody mentioned here. And to that end, I would say there's also a person that does some amazing work, also has classes on LinkedIn Learning, Keith McCormick. I recently released an episode with him called The Non-Obvious Skills for Data Science. So go check that out. I believe he will be on Ravit's show at some point. So if you don't like my interview style and you like his better, you can go listen to that one. So a lot of great resources there. So go check that out as well. Did that help?
If I can quickly piggyback onto Tom's comment, there might be some people here listening who think, well, I'm not working in data at the minute. I don't have any business stakeholders. So how does this apply to me? How can I care about business problems when I'm not working within the business? One of the things that's really cool that you can do is be really cheeky and identify people who are working within data science, within analytics, in industries or companies that you may be interested in actually going to work for, and reach out to them on LinkedIn. You might find you don't get responses from some people, but a lot of us are quite friendly and we'll quite happily chat. And that's a great opportunity to start asking questions around what kind of problems do you work on within the businesses or the industries that you work in? What challenges do you face? And you can get some really useful intelligence that will inform things like project portfolios when you start applying for jobs. So that's a good way to dig into business problems if you're not already employed.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. And there's a great comment in the chat by Christian. If you want to go ahead and verbalize that, that'd be great. Or if you want me to just read it out loud, I can do that as well. But I'd love to hear from you, Christian.
Yeah, that's fine. So kind of this it's interesting because this comes to my mind not just with data. Can you guys hear me okay, by the way?
Yeah, perfectly clear.
Okay, cool. So it's not just with data, but with products and everything. You can often get caught up in the features and the solutions and the tools, but pretty much in every school, it's really just best to focus on outcomes. And that's pretty much the whole comment for me.
Absolutely love it. And Eric, please shout out this meaningful project. I was supposed to include it in the newsletter. I just remembered. I'm so sorry for that. Go ahead and make sure you post about this hackathon in the Slack channel as well. But go ahead and let the people at home know about this.
Yeah, so there are actually a couple of cool hackathons coming up. One is from Democracy Lab. It's their St. Hactrix Day hackathon, and that's on March 13th. And so I'll drop the link in the chat, and the puns don't get any better as the event draws nearer. So just expect that. I went to their Hacky New Year one, and I'm planning on doing this one too. It's great because a lot of the organizations that come are repeat customers or whatever. And so I'm looking forward to working with the same group, which means I can build on something I learned last time. And so even though I don't work there or get paid, I can be part of that organization and contribute. And then the other is the Hack for Housing, which is by the Cape Fear Collective, which is, they're based here in North Carolina, but you don't have to be in North Carolina to participate, but it's all housing and, equality-based work. And so it's definitely gonna be really cool. That's April 17th. So it's a little bit further out, but I'll drop the link to that as well.
Thank you very much, Eric. Appreciate that. So next up, I want to ask a question, but I want to start with Greg's response. I hit Greg up a couple of days ago on Wednesday, actually. And so we're undertaking something huge at work. As you guys know, I'm like the first data scientist in the organization. And now my company is really ready to start making data a differentiator. That's our slogan for 2021. And so I've got myself, and I've got a essentially a super smart developer that's going to be helping me. And I asked him, I was like, hey man, what do you think is the one thing that I need to know to help make all of this successful? What do I need to learn or brush up on to help make it successful, this mission that we're undertaking? And I specifically asked for like a technical skill or technical know-how, but he responded with essentially what I'm about to phrase as the question here. So I reached out to Greg and I asked him, I was wondering if you had any resources for estimating time and cost for data related projects. When working with engineers, I feel I need to be able to understand and estimate the cost of my own instead of having engineers tell me. And that was the thing that my colleague had told me. He's like, yeah, I think, if anything, man, you probably need to do a better job of learning how to estimate how much things cost, how much time it will take, and so on. So Greg gave me a really, really great answer, but he's going to share that with us right here. And I'd love to hear from everybody else as well.
Yeah, thanks, Harpreet, and I appreciate you getting with me on this one. So I have quite a bit of projects that I'm working with my centralized technical team with that would leverage machine learning, but I find it a struggle to find the right resource or the right tool that helps me hone in on what the time it will take to produce that and what is the cost, right? So I kind of came up with my own framework to make it happen. And where I start is making peace, first of all, with what I can estimate versus what the tech team can estimate. So what I can estimate is coming up with a business case with all my metrics that can speak to the impact of my project. And I take this business case and truncate it into small deliverables. So it could be inside of a quarter or 2 quarters. And inside of these quarters, I also try to leave room for beta testing, because I know engineering team will want to not simply deliver at once. Once I have that, I would go to my tech teams to validate that the business case mandates some sort of machine learning use case. If that's it, then we move to the next phase, which is ingesting the number of metrics that means a lot to me, are impactful for my business, and for them to take those metrics and validate with their efforts, estimating their cost of ownership, cost of maintenance of those tools, of those ML tools, pipeline, everything like that. And then they tell me whether it's worth it or not. Sometimes they would eliminate some of those feature asks. Sometimes they would add on to it and things like that. So to me, it's between emails, multiple documents. I don't have a centralized tool. I could use a project management tool, but I find that it's quite the struggle for me to just say that projects like this is easily trackable in a project management tool. So I don't know if you guys go through the same thing. And simply because for me, I'm doing it for the first time for my department. I drive the technological roadmap for my department. First time we were implementing machine learning. Don't know what I'm doing in terms of time of implementation, something that I'm learning on the ground, creating my own workflows and learning as I go. But I realized that I cannot just put a timer on it without the implementation of the tech teams. So meaning if I'm ingesting hundreds of thousands of documents in a pipeline for a document review, they need to tell me whether they have a budget to pay the bills with regards to the tools they use. For example, it could be a text track, Amazon Comprehend. Those things cost money. The more documents I push through those pipelines, the more expensive, things like that. So
I love that. Thank you very much for that, Greg. Like that's very helpful for me because I mean the roles I've been in previously have been pretty much just research based, blank check, do what you want, and now it's like, all right, I'm doing something at a high level for the entire organization, so I need to start keeping costs intact. So I'd love to let's hear from Tom, and then let's hear from Dave, and then I definitely want to hear from Ben on this. So I'm just going to reiterate the question one more time just so Ben can hear it. I think Ben is back. So the question I was asking Greg was, when working with engineers, I feel like I need to be able to understand and estimate the cost of anything, any project on my own, instead of having the engineers tell me. Like, what resources, what tips can you share with me to help?
I apologize in it. Oh, sorry. I apologize in advance for my cynicism because I have 3 degrees in engineering, and I don't know one damn engineer that's ever estimated costs that I've worked with. I'm sure there are some, but I'm with Ben. If they have an estimate, it's no better than integer-based guesses. It's just really hard. Now, if you're talking about prototype costs or mass production costs, that gets a little more exact. But Harpreet, if you don't mind, Ben, what were you doing in that damn picture, buddy?
Oh, I was an extra in a movie. I
Which
was
movie?
The Chosen series. I was
Awesome.
Well, our investor was also an investor in that show, and so I was a VIP extra. So out of the 3,000 people at Sermon on the Mount, I was on the front row, right in front of Jesus. So I'm going to be in that show, which I think is like, people that know me think it's hilarious because they're like, "What the hell are you doing at
Ben,
Sermon?"
That's one of our household's favorite shows. We're just blown
Oh.
away with how awesome it is.
Yeah, so you'll see my look of childlike wonder in the camera. No, that's awesome that you know the show. Yeah, I was down in Dallas for that. I don't know. I think on storytelling and evangelism, sometimes you're looking for creative outlets that are a little outside the box to maybe give you a different view on things. Yeah, I was surprised how many comments I got on that. Some of them are hilarious. People are so witty.
That's a Netflix show, right? Chose one. I remember that one.
At one point, Ben, you were 2x comments to reactions at one point.
Yeah. So for people that don't know, it's a series on the story of Jesus, but it's treated like where the characters are actually identifiable. It's been watched in 90 million households. So it's really successful, I guess.
You know, keep an eye for you. So you really were playing the homeless hippie prophet.
I was a beggar. I was all dirtied up. And I don't want to say anything that'll offend anyone, but I'll say this. So I'm not used to being surrounded by very intense evangelicals, and so it's funny because I'm going there. I'm flying down there to be in the show, and literally, I think I have 3 or 4 experiences that are just like this. I'm like, "Hey, what's your name? My name's Ben Taylor," and they say, "When did you accept Jesus?" Like immediately, the second question, and it's almost scary because my reaction is like, yes, or like absolutely. Oh, of course I did. But I'm doing that because I don't want to like open up a further discussion. So hopefully that didn't irritate anyone on the call, but it didn't irritate me either. I just thought, oh, this is a very different world. I'm not used to being in this world, and it was interesting. Texas is a different country.
You're from Utah. I just thought you were Mormon.
Well, most people in Utah are. That's the assumption. And so I can't really make fun of Texas because I live in a community that's equally different.
I remember when I was driving through, like I was driving from Sacramento to Chicago, and I was on my way to grad school, and stopped by in Salt Lake City for a night and got some beer, and it was called Polygamy Porter.
Oh yeah,
and
yep.
that's burned into my memory. But I saw Jennifer was unmuted, so go for it, Jennifer.
Oh, they did some of their filming here in Utah, so I'm surprised you had to go to Texas. That's
yeah.
On that, sorry.
Yeah, you're right. They did some of their filming here. I don't know why. A trip to Dallas with this group of friends was always a good time. So it doesn't really matter where they're meeting up. I'm on board. But to answer the question about estimating cost, I think cost is interesting because you actually don't realize that you can make a ton of assumptions. And I think as a data scientist, that feels very wrong. Like you're lying. You're like, oh my gosh, like everything is fact. I'm building a model. It's like, no, it's not. Like your models are squishy. And so in HR, they use this idea of a utility function where you have like 6 assumptions chained together to come up with a dollar amount. And I would encourage everyone on this call to do the same thing. You want to be transparent. So if someone says, where'd you get that number? You then have like kind of your rationale, and your rationale is probably wrong, but it's not dishonest. You can have a conversation around your estimate, and it's all finger in the wind stuff, right, Tom? Where it's like, no one's going to get a penny accurate estimate. And in HR or in marketing, a lot of times we talk about, are we going to get a 2x multiplier on our investment or a 4x multiplier? And even that difference isn't that important. It's a prioritization ranking metric. Maybe we should work on the 4x project rather than the 2x project.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate that. So I'd love to hear from I guess, yeah, Tor. Let's hear from Tor. He's got his hand up, and after Tor, Dave, I'd love to hear your comments around this topic.
Well, I've been working with numbers now for X amount of years. Budgets are always a fun thing, and when we refer to the famous engineers, bottom line is they're a pain in the ass because they will never commit. But what I used to do, just to give you like a small tip on the issue of people having difficulties in giving an answer, what I used to do is I would, instead of asking for a specific, ask for a min max. That will give you a range, okay? So when you have the range, okay, some people that are very uncomfortable, they will give you a large range. People that are more comfortable will give you a smaller range. Now, the people that give you a smaller range are the ones that you're going to be a little bit careful about, but they will You can then ask them exactly why they're giving that short range. Okay, they will then explain to you very quickly how they can get that. On the other hand, people with very large ranges, you need to talk to. You need to sit down and say, okay, why did you say min? Why did you say the maximum? Would it be fair to assume an average would be good, or a median, or some other facility? So that to me is the information gathering from people to give you input. To me, as if you are in charge of setting up this and scheduling and doing all of these things, it is your responsibility to tell people your expectations. It's very simple. If you expect them to be able to do it in 10 hours and they say, no, it can't be done in 10 hours, well, then it's your job to have them explain to you why it can't be done. Now, in a friendly way, because you're also learning. It's like with ML. You're learning that, okay, the range or the input that they give you, the feedback, next time you will say 12 hours or 8 hours or whatever your experience is. And over time, the more experience you get with it, the more you will actually be able to challenge. And to me, budgeting is all about challenge in a good way. It's asking why. And like been said already, with data driven or very detailed, everything has to be perfect. There is no such as a perfect world. I'll give you an experience that I did. I was operationally a cost controller for 15 countries. And we had some countries that are more difficult than others. And in the end of the day, when my team and my departments, et cetera, were doing their budgets, I used a random between formula. It worked perfectly. I asked for mix, max, min, and I used a random between. Technically, my organization were often or most of the time more in line with what actually happened than a lot of the others. But then when the management team found out, the CEO and the CFO, that I used random between, that was the end of that story. And I left the company about 6 months later. But I'll be more than happy, Greg, if you want to do as part of a separate session on this. We can talk and definitely, I don't know how many you're talking about people-wise, but we can then go through and I can actually give you some ideas. I use Excel, that's my tool. But depending on the size and the number of people involved, it should be no problem to develop a simple yet effective budget model for you to do this. That will also be flexible so you can use it for any type of projects as long as you have your resources, which is your cost per hour, you have your tools, which also you can calculate into cost per hour, whatever you want to do, okay? So I'll be more than happy to take a couple of hours on that. I have lots of free time now during this COVID time.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Yeah, definitely gonna take you up on that as
and
a
it's also available to anyone else. If anyone else want to discuss those things, technically it's one of my specialties.
Well, there we go, man. If we discuss it, trust me, it'll be recorded and shared as part of the podcast. So, and on YouTube. So no worries. Dave, anything to add here?
Yeah. So just to give you guys my qualifications before I respond, I've been a professional software engineer. I have proposed and sold many multi-million-dollar IT projects. I used to be a consultant on time and materials where I would have to create a budget, and if we went over, we lost money. So I have experience creating estimates and costs for technical projects. That being said, if you do not know how to do the work yourself, you cannot estimate it. Period, end of story. You have to rely on the engineers. If you don't like your engineers and you think that they're sandbagging you, get new engineers. However, unless you know for sure what it takes to actually do the work, because you've done it, there's no way you can accurately cost estimate it. So you have to rely on other people. Period, end of story. I will not tell you how many times when an account executive priced something out, we lost our shirt. Okay, you just can't do it. So that's number one. Two, in the data science space in particular, it can get problematic. If you're trying to build a model, some sort of data-driven predictive aspect of your project is like the cornerstone of the ROI you're getting back, then it gets even more complicated because there is no guarantee at the beginning of the project that you're actually going to build a model that meets the business requirements anyway. You have no way of knowing that up front. So there's this idea of experimentation. There's this idea that, whoa, the first pass through the model didn't work. We need to get more data or different data, or we need to do this. So you need to take that into account when you start pricing those things out. So gist of it is, if you want reliable estimates, don't build any models. It's much easier that way.
I think Tom, you wanted to share something. I wanted to add something real quick after.
It's real quick. And Ben, I'm kind of trying to leverage from an old post you did. I remember you were talking about your startup days and how there were some people that just didn't get how their activities made a difference to whether you guys were going to make it or not. And it struck me, you know, we can all get a little cynical in our roles, but I'm always looking for extreme parsimony now and the best spirit to bring to the table. And it seems like, I hope this isn't off point, and Greg, bring it back on if it is off point. But if everybody really had a passion to do as much as possible with as little as possible, these estimates wouldn't be as big of a concern. But I hope that's not off point.
Well, I was going to say that, you know, Tom, to your point, I think there are silver linings, because I'm having also another type of experience. Just checking here if people see it the same way. We're starting to hear about ML ops nowadays. I think about AI as this infrastructure putting out like products, right? And nowadays, business teams, they're getting better and better at finding use cases. Those use cases are only increasing. Whether you're in supply chain, you're in finance, marketing, operations, you name it. And with that, you need that infrastructure to be churning, to be pushing out items. So for one of my big projects, I'm consulting with the technical teams. And do you guys remember this term where the app was a thing? You know, there was this commercial that was like, oh, you want to do this? There's an app for that. You want to do this? There's an app for that. Well, what I'm hearing is, you want to do this? There's a model for that. We can train. So for some reason, they are taking existing models for similar use cases and asking me to provide the data so they can train it and reduce the time for that model to be ready for mine. So I could have, I'll take a quick example. If you think about a product from Amazon would require a label, right? So I'm in the safety and compliance area. Inside of one label, you have multiple models that can work and provide do a task. One could be search for a particular symbol, making sure the symbol is correct and needs to be there for whatever marketplace I'm doing business in. Fetch for this number, that's a registration number. Do a web scraping for a government website. Make sure that that number is registered. Another one might be looks for this claim, translate it, making sure the translation is right in German or in French, whatever, you name it. So all sorts of kind of things in just one big project. And I feel like when you have a centralized team who are good at building pipelines, then you can kind of shorten the time to launch these projects, right? You can shorten your deliverables a little bit better. Maybe other people have been through the same situation.
I haven't, but I'd love to hear if anybody has, man. That's an interesting, complex question. I'm gonna toss this one over to Dave or Tom or Ben or anybody else who's dealt with this.
I just wanted to follow up. Greg, I was listening very carefully, and I think you brought just about the best description of current best practices and estimates. It's and I don't know how to best do it, but it strikes me that if you really want to optimize this or maximize it, you still appeal to the human spirit to say, all right, guys, the cheaper we can do this and the faster we can do it, the more money we have for the next project. But I'm not sure in most organizations, people have enough incentive to be, that's ownership thinking. And I'm beginning to think that there's not enough ownership motivation for your average employee. I'm really interested in this question, but I'm more interested in, okay, but how do you maximize the motivation? But you gave a classical perfect answer, Greg. In the status quo of everybody showing up for work and putting in their 8 hours, I'm trying to think, can we get more creative than that? Can we get more motivational than that? And I hope I'm not taking the question off topic by those points.
We've got a similar thing, Tom, where engineers are not motivated by hearing the bottom line. I make a lot of presentations, and a lot of times it's, oh, our organization has this revenue, blah, blah, blah. Who cares? Let's talk about the technology. And so you may be able to incentivize on, speed to the technology, being the first in the world to deliver and things like that. But motivating on revenue, yeah, not motivating to a team of hardcore engineers. But Harpreet, to your first question about estimates, it's not a single point in time. And kind of like Dave did earlier, let me tell you why I have some experience in this. For about 15 years of my time at Intel, I was a PM. We estimated everything, and Dave's right. You can't get it right. Nobody does. I'd be a bajillionaire if I could. But rely on your experts and monitor it as you go. It's a very simple formula. You've got schedule, you've got scope, you've got resources. And when you lose one, the others have to give. And so you always have to be monitoring. And when you find a team that can rapidly deliver a model in less time than they say, you remember that. Also, buffer your schedule 50%.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. I appreciate that. That's really, really insightful. Tor, I see you've got your hand up here. Go for it.
Yeah, it was just two things. What Tom was talking about, the efficiency, and Greg, when you said, to me, it's two things you're talking about. One is, of course, to look at the efficiency, how you're working, and all the people that are involved, and how you can improve it. To me, those are this, how should I say, more the soft skills. Okay, this is a question of, like Jennifer also was saying, that it's the benchmarking, the quality control, the follow-up. But however way, you need to have a budget at the beginning. Our budget corrects? Never. They will always have. But you need to be able to explain to yourself why you're deviating from the budget. When it comes to the efficiency, etc. Okay, yeah, you may improve your efficiency. That doesn't mean you're going to have a better profit, because you will have competitors out there that's going to be able to come in and do it as fast as you will. If you can do it, somebody else will. You have to be smarter all the time. And to me, it's more a question of using and utilizing and understanding your resources, availability, efficiency levels, etc., etc. And these are things that you will keep track on your own. I mean, it's not necessarily something you share unless you are a manager and you have the responsibility for the employees. Then you will have to communicate back and forth. But if you're more in a position of doing the budget and the planning and resourcing, it's not your job to go and tell them if they're not efficient or not. Your job is to find a way to indirectly guide them so they become more efficient. So find a good way to communicate with the people. That's the key. And over time, by sharing and, after you finish, for example, a project, to go back and discuss, this is what we planned, this is our budget was, and then sit down and have a summary and also get their input, why it was delayed. Learn from the experience. That's the key.
Thank you very much. So much good advice, guys. Really, really appreciate that. Greg, did we answer your question at all? Because I mean, that was initially spawned off by my question. Then you had a question after that. Was yours is good? Cool. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah. So for sure. So if anybody sees this trend too, with I guess if they're centralized, and pumping models like crazy. Please do share with me how your organization is able to do that. Like, what are the tools? What are the, how do you see this going, the next couple of years? Because, MLOps, I think they're going to continue to talk about that. And a couple startups are going to continue to come forward. Dave, you probably have something you want to share.
Yeah. So I'd bet $1,000 that the way this is going to go is the way it's gone before. So this concept of centers of excellence is nothing new. It's been around for a long time, and it is characterized every emerging technology in the general IT space over the past 25 years. When something becomes so valuable that streamlining it for the business becomes a very economic viable thing to do, you get the center of excellence. And what happens is that as long as you can get in the pipeline, you're golden, right? Because you're working with experts who know what they're doing. They have processes, they do things, they chug this stuff out. Then the problem becomes the demand builds up at the back of the funnel, and then you got to wait. And then what ends up happening, people create their own budget and they hire people to do it themselves because they don't want to wait for the center of excellence to do it. So this cycle is repeated over and over again. And like I said, I'd bet big money that that's exactly what you're going to see in the machine learning space as well, because it's happened before with all kinds of things. Software deployments in general, CI/CD, data warehouses, ETL, data pipelines, data engineering, you name it, right? It's all over the place. It's the same pattern that you see repeated over and over again.
I'd love to hear from Ben on this because I feel like Ben would have some amazing insight. Ben, are you still here? Yes, you are.
Yeah, I'm still here. Do you mind focusing the question so I can make sure I'm...
Yeah. Greg, do you want to bubble it down again?
So how do you see the concept of ML ops? How do you see that evolved in the next couple of years? I feel like a lot of people are seeing that day in, day out, data science team need to be able to, output models a little bit fast to keep up with the requirements. And how do you see that evolve? Because we're not thinking about, stealing DevOps, habits to adopt it in ML ops. How do you see the evolvement of that?
Yeah, I love that topic. So if 75 or 85% of AI projects fail, depending on what you think is right, the majority fail, then a small fraction I would put into the one and done category. And I would say they feel very experimental. And then the long tail or the rest, they actually live. People rely on them. The models are constantly replaced, but they also run into issues like feature drift, stuff like that. So there's a whole horror story of things that happen on the production side that I think the AI community is slowly coming up to speed with, and that's why a lot of the MLOps discussion is concerned about that. So I think for anyone doing stuff in production, it'll be something that's expected. But I think as a community, we're really going to start sharing fail stories more openly about, when I was at HireVue, I had a feature drift excursion, and it was something we could not have anticipated. It came from a vendor. A vendor changed a feature threshold without telling us, and it impacted the customer. And the customer complained, which is like the worst scenario. But we had to put systems in place to look for model drift, and we didn't know we needed that. So, yeah. So, I think that's just kind of my take on it. MLOps it'll be a requirement for anyone that's doing anything in AI to kind of have the checkbox of what are the oh shit moments that you're prepared for. Because a lot of people are reactive. They're allowed to say oops, but there's a lot of AI models out there where oops is not an option. Like in healthcare, like in marketing, we say oops all the time. But in marketing is one of those domains you can say oops, but in healthcare you can't say oops, or in manufacturing you don't want to say oops.
Yeah, ML ops is so cool, man. It's like one of my favorite new topics to learn about. I mean, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my sponsor for the podcast, Comet ML. They've got an amazing product, like legit, and a really cool product that helps you kind of, I guess, get more insight into the whole ML ops process. Check it out if you guys get a chance. So wanted to go to a couple questions that I got on email through from one of our community members, Hema. First, she got two questions. First question is, what tools, commercial or open source, and architecture do you recommend for building end-to-end data science platforms? Any tips on that? I don't know if I actually understand that question.
So Harpreet, there's a lot of, I don't even want to answer this, but it's because I've kind of wanted to hear other people's opinions on it for a while, but I'll just say why it's a very interesting topic to me. So this would be like, Azure, where it's just drag and drop components to build your machine learning pipelines, or there's a host of them out there. I can't even remember their names. I have these vendors approaching me a lot of time claiming they can improve our development stuff, and I'm not sure this is accurate. I'm confessing to everyone, but I have this feeling like, why are you doing this? If someone really knows Python, they don't need that. Now, I don't. I'm just saying that's my reaction. I don't know if that's accurate, but I get confused why they're building a company based on. Sorry, it's a frustrating area for me, is what I'm trying to confess.
Yeah, that we use Azure at work and some managed services as well. I see the benefit of it if you're like the only data scientist and you just can't possibly do everything on your own. And maybe there's gaps in your knowledge and you might need some help. I could see the benefit for it there, but I also have that same kind of feeling as you do. It's like, oh well, if we can build it ourselves, why not do it? We need like 3 more people, and it's probably cheaper to use some managed service than doing it ourselves. But yeah, I'd love to hear from Ben and Dave on this.
So it's been a while since I've kind of rolled up my sleeves and done programming, and I'm looking to get back into it. But Docker for me was life changing because I remember like installing Linux ISOs. I'd be like, I don't know what I did. I don't know what happened to this update. This system is screwed up, and I have to like reinstall the ISO. Like I remember having that experience. And when Docker came around, it just offered this level of accountability and transparency that I thought was amazing. I so I feel like anyone that's doing development, I would try to make sure that you kind of find that as a foundation. I think the other thing too that's happening is if you wait 10 years, whatever is best practices it won't be cool anymore. Or like I remember I started with like LAMP stack with PHP and MySQL, and I felt like a rock star. And I go interact with these React developers, and they're making fun of me about like, they're like, oh, gross, you write raw SQL? What are you, a dinosaur? Because they're used to like the model view controllers. And yeah, so this stuff, it's constantly changing. But Docker for me was one of those things where I thought, man, this is a godsend, like compared to how we used to do it.
Thank you, Ben. Greg, see you're in mute, and then I'd love to hear from Dave on this as well.
Go ahead, Dave, and then I just have a question for Ben to about Docker. So go ahead, Dave.
Okay. I found the question interesting, Harpreet. And the first thing I thought of, and this is being a bit of an architecture nerd, what did they mean by platform? Generally speaking, if you think about platforms from a traditional technology space, platforms are typically a collection of capabilities and services that accelerate your ability to deliver business scenarios, use cases, without having to write a bunch of code. That's typically what typifies a platform. So saying Python is a platform is that I would be like, no, that's wrong. Absolutely wrong. Python is not a platform. It's a programming language. Just like Azure itself, is it a platform? Or GCP or AWS? Kind of, sort of, but not really. Think of something like SAP. If you know what SAP is a platform. Okay, that's a platform. So if you're looking for a complete end-to-end data science platform, to my knowledge, I don't think one exists yet, because the trajectory of ML ops and data science in general is still too nascent yet to actually have something as platformy as something like SAP. Because maybe some of the folks aren't as old as I am, but back in the old days, SAP didn't exist, and companies built all of their business systems from scratch in COBOL on a mainframe because they had to. Later on, they bought platforms like SAP to help them automate it and deploy all this stuff faster. So I think the answer to answer that question is, it doesn't exist yet. There are certainly platformy pieces that you still have to stitch together yourself, but there still isn't an overall data science machine learning platform yet.
Thank you very much, man. I appreciate that. Greg, go for it.
So I guess for me, it's for my understanding. Where I'm kind of blind is my understanding of where Docker stop. You being someone who knows how to deliver um, a model, for example, and then in where a software engineer who knows the architecture of that front end product, say, I don't know, an app or the Amazon website itself, how do they merge, right? So what happens? How does that Docker, connect? Do you need a state-of-the-art expert in API, or how do we connect the two? Because you're gonna have companies with legacy software that you're delivering a Docker to. How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So at Higher View, I could show a demo with like a Flask wrapper or something around a Python script, but normally the engineers they would then take it from there. And actually, Higher View is probably the clumsiest handoff because you actually had a silo data science team saying, "Look, my Python code runs," and engineers that say, oh, like, like. And actually, Higher View is funny. We had a Docker container that I think was larger than 10 gigs, and you throw that over to like the DevOps people, and they're just like, "What are you guys doing?" So there was an awkward transition. I think now the best practices is a good data scientist group. They try to behave more like developers, where they write classes and they have Python tests, and then they would have like a README with use cases, and they wouldn't do anything with the API. They just say, "Here's a demo, here's an example, and here's all my version control." And at Data Robot, the data scientists that actually code in the product, they feel like they are 100% software engineers. They don't feel like the data science silo that I experienced at Higher View.
That's what I'm seeing too. I'm seeing I find myself talking more to software engineers than data scientists, to tell you the truth, and they're very aware of how the models work, and they're very good at integrating to the existing system that we have. So, but in terms of the Docker, it's kind of like I understand why it exists. I just can't put my finger on the how.
I like Docker for like a team of data scientists or researchers that are collaborating. So it's kind of a proof of concept. Like, look, it works, and then once it works, then you can work with engineering because Amazon has some beautiful stuff like Lambdas where I don't, does Lambdas run Docker? Because we were running Lambdas. I think we just ran pure Python. And so there could be some use cases where you don't need Docker anymore. But for my development, when I'm doing research, I love that stability. I don't want a software update, or I love that I can jump to a different server. Like that was a big thing we dealt with at our startup is we had all these different servers. We had some huge servers, little servers, laptops, and being able to just kind of move your Docker container around with the same code base was really nice.
Cool.
So,
Thank you.
I took a class on Udemy, still going through it. I can send you a link to it. It's all about Docker. It's really good. I think Udemy has a sale going on right now, so I'll send that to you. And like, I came up as a statistician, like actuary / statistician. That's like my background. So very just academic type of background, and transitioning into like a data science type of role where I have to start doing more and more software engineering. It's been tough, but the best thing I've been able to do, I think the best thing I've done is like, I could still write good quality code, I could still write code that runs, but in order to make it deployable, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I will make a software engineer sit down with me and tell me everything they did to get this to not only run on my machine, but just run deployed on the cloud, and just ask the most stupidest question is like, I don't care how stupid I look. Like, I've got questions, please answer them for me because I want to learn. And I just kind of take that approach, and it's been very, very helpful. And I just seen the cycle of like accelerated returns on my learning just exponentially grow from there. So another question, again from Hema. I've got no clue how to answer this one, but is there a standard to identify the number of topics and hyperparameters like alpha and beta when we do topic modeling or NLP stuff? I don't know anything about NLP or topic modeling. So hopefully somebody here has experience with that. I'd love to hear from you if you do.
Like language topics. We did something at HireView. We trained. I can't remember what the network was, but we trained an NLP network on 400,000 resumes, and then we just use a clustering algorithm to find the isolated pockets. And in the centroid words were actually pretty actionable. Like achievement would be surrounded by accolade, scholarship, bronze. Like all these words were like, oh, like you want to go like that to the AI system that found it because it's useful. But then the number of topics is kind of a gray area because like if you guys have looked at these clustering maps, you can find some that you think are great, and then you can find others that feel really like maybe it, reminds me of like that Rick and Morty episode where like you have like these things that are morphed together. That's what some of these clusters feel like, where you're like they're not, it's not a solid topic, but you can kind of stare at it cross-eyed and see there's 2 or 3 things in here. We dealt with that on the vision side with images, but also on language.
So kind of drill down a little bit further on that question. So is there a standard to identify the ideal number of topics and hyperparameters, or is that what you're doing with the clustering?
I think at the time our favorite clustering algorithm was TSNE, and I think since then that has been replaced by what's the new popular one that people use instead? There's a new one. There's a new sexy one.
Glove.
That's for the language encoder.
Right.
There's a clustering algorithm that I thought was preferred now over TSNE for clustering. Maybe I can. Has grid in the name. Man, it's been a while. Sorry, I'll see if I can find it and I'll throw it in the chat.
Yeah, if anybody else has any tips on that, please go ahead and let us know. And yeah, this class is apparently, that's the one I was talking about. It's free, man. I paid like $15 for it. Damn it.
I think it's UMAP. So TSNE versus UMAP.
Cool. Thank you. But yeah, Greg, that was that Dogger class, the same one that I paid $15 for, which is now free. It's all good. Any other questions?
I have a question. Oh, go ahead, 12FEB.
Yeah,
Or you.
Jackie. It's a quick question, and we touched on hackathons a bit before, and I would like to try one, but I've never done one before. So do you have any advice on that?
That's a good question. I've actually, I've never done a hackathon, and I know Eric has. So Eric, do you want to chime in here?
Yeah, sure. Just do it. Because, like, just do it. I'm like my first hackathon, I was like, well, I think I know enough to where hopefully I can do something useful. And if I don't know enough to do something useful, I'm going to learn from somebody who does know enough to do something useful. And it was a good experience. And like the one that I dropped the thing at the Hack for Housing one, I was just talking to the organizer and to double check on the skill levels of things. And he said, it doesn't matter, like novice to expert, it's okay. We take whoever, we get, and we're ready for that. And he said, we have a nice bell curve of people who are signed up. Most people are kind of middle of the road skills in whatever they're bringing, whether it's UX or Python or SQL or whatever, it doesn't matter. And so the best thing to do is to just get in there, give it a try, and yeah, just do it. There you go, Tom.
Thanks, Eric.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And people are nice. People are cool. They want to succeed, and they want to see you succeed. So I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind.
I agree with this, and yeah, I've been a mentor for 2 hackathons before, and they're all hosted in Australia. It's Hack Makers. They're gonna have a huge one right now. I think the name is Smart Cities Hack. Lots of projects in there, and basically they try to pair you up with a diverse team with different skills. And to me, from a coding perspective, I don't help much, but from a business perspective, in terms of how you pitch your idea it's very enjoyable for me. Where I saw teams come up with some nice fraud detector technology, and the way they created the story behind it, why they built the model, how the model is performing that task. It's a nice thing. And they put some rules around how to pitch, and there's a chance to win some money. So you really lose nothing by participating. So I fully agree with Eric. Just do it, try it, and then see if you like it.
So I won a hackathon once. I got $3,000 and I blew it all on snowboarding like the day after. And my wife was like, this isn't play money," which was pretty funny because I said, if I can't play with my winnings, I don't want to win. Like, I don't want to, I'm not motivated to go do another one. But I've had the opportunity to host these. So I've hosted 3 data competitions. One, we raised $15,000 and we gave it away in huge checks, which was super fun. And yeah, so I've kind of had that experience too. I like the idea of doing hackathons where there's like a performance metric, something that's very objective to measure. I've seen other ones where there's panels and groups of people pitching. Those for me I've become disengaged. It's hard for me to be motivated as a participant or even a judge on those. I don't know why. I'm curious what other people think on performance-based hackathons and machine learning versus like Kaggle style versus a committee with a presentation.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from anybody who has experience with this. Tom, go for it.
I'll just say I haven't done much, but the few that I've done, that they're just challenging. They help you grow. They help you improve your pipeline tools. I just can't. They get so intense. I don't like to do them very often because I'm super lazy.
The smartest engineers are the lazy ones, right?
I think maybe Ben, you like the Kaggle style, if I understand well. Maybe you like the idea of the underdog kind of taking on the experts and coming out on top. Maybe that's what motivates you more than. Is that what you're trying to say? Versus being.
I like to know if I'm winning during the competition, so something that's subjective. So it's funny because I always bag on R versus Python, and I lost a data competition to an R Shiny app, and I kind of like for good reason because it was sexy, like it looked amazing, and this was for Skull Candy, and we thought like from an analytics perspective ours was way better, but they had an R Shiny app where you could actually like, ooh, wow, look at my reviews, and so that. Yeah, if I'm investing, which is funny because now I work in marketing where now I would actually see that as an opportunity to kind of play with the ooh and the ah. But back then, 7 or 8 years ago, I felt I didn't like those types of competitions. I didn't want someone to beat me with an R Shiny app.
The best thing to happen to R Shiny is that you can pull it into Python now.
Oh, you can? Yeah, I remember always feeling like that was a miss on the Python side. Like, man, these R Shiny apps, as much as I like to talk crap about R, they're pretty slick. They look really nice.
Well, my only goal was to get a thumbs down from Langer, and I achieved my goal. So.
So if I may, I would offer a little bit of a different perspective.
Yeah.
So I've participated in a number of hackathons over the years, and I've also participated in a number of data for good kind of things. In particular, once I did a DataKind event at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation when I lived in Seattle. And what I've found universally is that the data for good types of events that I've attended are actually more realistic about what I actually did day in and day out as an analytics professional, because you're working with like real world data sets and they're all dirty and they're crappy and people don't really understand what they want and they don't necessarily know how they're actually going to extract any value out of the data, rather than somebody coming up with a cool idea for an app to build, which is fun, by the way, don't get me wrong. But what I've found personally is that those experiences working with like DataKind types of projects were more like real world kinds of things that I did as a professional.
I'm interviewing somebody about data for good, in a couple of weeks. And Driven Data actually has a bunch of cool competitions that are all about helping people and doing data for good. I'll link that here. But if you just go to drivendata.org/competitions, you'll see that they got a whole bunch of really cool competitions that you can get involved in. Um, but yeah, I guess the Jacqueline, to answer your question, you just do it, have fun. Like it'd probably be a great resume item, so definitely go for it.
Great, thanks.
Jacqueline, a chicken entry method that I would not judge you for is I noticed a lot of contestants not using their real name. That way, if you don't perform well, you don't have to worry about it. but I'm sure if you do several of them, you'll get quite good, actually.
Open it up for one last question if anybody has one. I didn't see anything in the chat, but if anyone has a last minute question, go ahead and take the floor.
Just a quick one.
Go for it.
I just want to follow up on the hackathon. I'm not, technically, I'm a non-tech, okay? I don't know how to program or anything like this. But could a person like myself join these kind of hackathons?
Yeah, I think they're pretty open. Like, so for example, like the city I live in, Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, they have like hackathons that are hosted by just some community organizer. So I would say go to like meetup.com and look in the city that you live in and just type in like, hackathon or data science hackathon, and anybody can join.
Cool. Thanks.
For the ones we would host, we would always provide starter code. So we'd actually give contestants a working kernel immediately because we didn't want them to be confused. And so that was really good for people to just get started today.
Awesome. So hopefully that was answered your question, Tor. Awesome, cool. Anybody else got any last minute questions? Otherwise, we'll go ahead and call it the evening. Be sure to check out the interview I released today on the podcast with C.N. Lewis. She's awesome, very entertaining. Had a great time interviewing her. Got some other awesome episodes lined up for the rest of the month. Greg's episode is launching next Friday. I thought it was this Friday, but actually it is next Friday. So next Friday, tune into the episode with Greg and listen to it and come prepared with questions, because I think Greg would love to answer questions on what he was talking about. Got a lot of other cool stuff happening for the podcast. I just booked a couple of interviews with some really, really cool people. One of which is John Vervaeke. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him, but he's freaking awesome. John Vervaeke, Tiffany Schlane, and some other really, really cool individuals that will be coming on the show. It doesn't look like there are any more questions. Well, take care, everybody. Have a good rest of the weekend. Remember, Comet ML office hours happen on Sunday. So if you did not get enough of me today, you can still get more on Sunday. So be sure to check those out. Those are also a lot of fun. As usual, this will be posted on the podcast and on YouTube. You guys take care. Have a good rest of the weekend. And remember, you got one life on this planet. Why not try to do something big? Cheers, everybody.
Kudos.
Thanks, Harpreet.
You.